Hello and welcome to Bergkamp Wonderland. This is an Arsenal podcast and it is me and Steve. You all right, Steve?
Yep, all right, Dan.
Lovely. And Mr. Goonaholic. You all right, Dave? You're still on mute. We've only just started. Oh, Lord.
I haven't gone mute. Yes, I have. Go on. Anyway, I'm fine, Danny. Thank you very much. Shame about Fikey.
Are we wearing you out with your constant use? Because this is now your second thing in about 5 days.
3.
Oh, dear. It's even worse. Anyway, that's the only introductions I'm doing because we're just going to get straight on with it. So the first thing we need to talk about is going to be the Man City game. Now, when I said before the show, this is a running order, David said, I forgot about the City game. And I think that's what we have all forgotten about the City game. And I think it's best that we do forget about the City game. Is there anything either you two would like to bring up about the City game? The second one, the second thrashing?
Yeah.
Go on.
I think what was quite interesting for me was I watched that game and then by accident I managed to watch City-Chelsea. And I was sat in the boozer. My mate's a Chelsea fan. He said, I want to watch this. And I thought, I don't really want to watch this again because it's Chelsea beat City. And then I was just sat there mesmerised how basically City hypnotised Chelsea. And they had them sat back off the ball. They wouldn't even come and get the ball, Chelsea. I think their idea was, we're going to stand here, you're not getting in between the lines. And, you know, for quite a while, Chelsea were hitting them on the break. They couldn't finish properly. But, of course, they got undone by a long ball from Sane, which was a brilliant play. But what interested me was the intensity of the passing, the positional play, the domination. And they dominated in midfield. You know, Chelsea are a strong physical team, much more physically stronger than we are, and much more micromanaged and more organised than we are. They had as little chance as we did. It just shows you how much Guardiola's improved City and what a good team they are. And I think, you know, it stood out more against Arsenal because we made stupid mistakes and made it easier for them. And also the focus is on the manager and on the team for the obvious reasons. But, you know, to watch them destroy us twice, and the second time was a bit more emphatic than the final, in terms of the way they played, and then go and do it to Chelsea as well, just actually maybe shows you perhaps it wasn't as horrific as we thought it was.
Do you think that if maybe Chelsea would have had Kante play the game rather than just drink? I mean, I don't think Drinkwater's a proper Chelsea player anyway. I think they only went there to try and reinvigorate. Yeah, no, why they signed him is hopefully to try and get the same kind of combination with him and Kante they had at Leicester, and that's not going to work. So playing Fabregas in the middle next to Drinkwater. And then I thought it's hilarious the way that they just kept lobbing the balls over to Hazard because, yeah, Hazard is a 6'4" player that does that, isn't he? Playing with his back to goal. The poor bloke was turned inside out every time. He was having a nightmare of a game. But, yeah, just show they beat anybody. Nobody has a chance. Did you watch the game, Dave?
Yes, I have to say I did. I have forgotten most of it, but the bits that stick in the memory are we did actually play a lot better than we had done in the League Cup final when we more or less gave it to them, said after you look, Claude, and get on with the game. But I thought we played a lot better last Thursday, and we certainly started. We could have had a couple of goals before they got their first one, but once they'd got the first one, and it was the first time that Sane had really picked up the ball and run at anybody, and he absolutely petrified them, didn't he? So, you know, he was responsible for the first one. And I thought after that we were letting them through, or not letting them through. We had little option. The first 2 goals in particular, they were absolutely sensational. And I think a lot of people have said after that game, that was like watching us 12 years ago. And it's true. You have to hold your hands up and say they're going to be worthy champions.
But you look at the stats. We beat them 10-9 on shots. We beat them 24-11 on tackles. We beat them 6-1 on corners. But that game, I mean, they actually, you could see they'd taken their foot off, hadn't they? When they come out for the second half.
Second half, yeah.
Hasn't Wenger said many times in the past that he doesn't like to embarrass teams? When we're winning, just keep it a win. I know we smashed 7 past Middlesbrough and Everton, but as a general, he doesn't like to go out there and smash the teams, does he? So do you think maybe Man City did that? They didn't want to embarrass him? Because they could have gone on and got another 6 or 7. I mean, 6 or 7 in total.
I think there was definitely an element of that in the final. Once they got it won, I think he said to them, calm it down, just keep the ball, don't murder them. And definitely in the final, but I think in the second one they did go for it. I think I think the thing is people used to look at us. We used to destroy teams in 15 minutes, and it was all over and done with. But we still had gears we could go up, and that's what. We'll see how good this City side is in the Champions League very shortly.
I don't know that they took their foot off. I'll tell you what would have been interesting if Aubameyang had scored the penalty and it was 3-1 with lots of time left. It would have been interesting to see if they played any differently then. Might have stung them into something, you never know.
Do you think people were harsh on the way that he took the penalty?
He telegraphed it a bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think, I think people are unjustifiably harsh against him. I mean, as one of the Polish guys on Canal Plus said, he's only played 5 games of football since he's joined Arsenal.
It's only been here 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's mainly due down to the fact that the Europa League and he's not eligible to play it, otherwise he'd be playing in it. And he's got to get accustomed to a lot, and the team's going through a lot of shit. And, his predecessor is currently last seen on Instagram peddling away whilst listening to some soul music, trying to get his knee sorted out. He wasn't getting any service up front either. So, Lacazette's just going to have to bottle down and get his nose to the grindstone. Not Lacazette, Aubameyang, I mean, rather.
Do you think this shows that people are maybe slightly too critical over Lacazette? I mean, you look at the fact that he's had all those goals and all those assists, and then people going, "Oh no, you're rubbish. You should have got 50 goals." But this season, by now, I'm just having a look. Lacazette. It's halfway down the bloody page now.
People are forgetting it's his first season in the Premiership. He's had to play up front in a system he's not familiar with, in a league where defenders are allowed to get away with battering forwards and all sorts of shenanigans. He's not getting any service. We've got a ludicrous situation where we bought centre halves who could ping balls over the top or through the lines to go between centre halves, so fast moving attackers could pick him up. That's his lunch money. That's his trade, and we're not using him. We're not finding him. We're not looking for him. If you watch him during games, he's making runs. He's dragging out defenders. He's pulling people all over the place. But no one, and Ozil needs a bollocking for this. He never tries to find him from 30 yards, and neither does Mustafi. They could both do it, but that's people seem to forget that. When Thierry Henry came from Juventus and Wenger played him on the left wing, he was getting booed at Highbury. People saying, "Oh, fucking hell, we bought the wrong one. We should have bought Trezeguet. He's bloody awful. His first touch went to rat shit." And then eventually he got it right. And then the end of that season, he had a glut of goals where he just scored 20 goals in all the next games he played because he got his confidence back. Robert Pires was another one. Sat on the bench next to Vieira with his mouth open wide. And he said to Vieira, "Fucking hell, how did they get away with all this crap every game?" Vieira just said to him, don't worry, you'll get used to it.
That was at Sunderland on the opening day of the season. Yeah. I remember that.
So, people, it's the FIFA generation. They want instant gratification all the time. I'm afraid that the young spotties with too much testosterone have got to learn that real life isn't FIFA, whether it's football or job searching or any other bit. What goes online is online. It ain't real. And the fact is, if you put Thierry Henry in his prime or Ian Wright in his prime up front in the current team, they both fucking struggle to score because there's no service.
Correct.
And I was saying about Lacazette's form: 29 games, 9 goals, 4 assists. Now Chris said to us that he got a knee injury around Christmas, so he played the next 6 games, which is when his goal drought really got into full effect. The next 6 games he was playing and carrying an injury. I remember someone said on one of the pods that, "Oh look, after that he had a shot, and then he had no pace about him." And then now we know, not only is it because he was carrying an injury, there was no one else to play in that position, but he's not getting the supply. So I think this has just shown that that people are far too quick to judge. And there I am claiming that Twitter is far too quick to judge. I'm not exactly in adding. Oh look, it's Mr. Fife. He's adding it. He's there. Hold on, listeners. We're going to add Mr. Fife to the group.
Woohoo!
Oh, hold on. No, he stopped calling before I could add him in. Here we go. Invite him. We'll leave this bit in the show. Could it be Mr. Fife?
I can see a picture with Arsene Wenger. I'm not sure I want that in the podcast, to be honest.
Hello.
Have you got your headphones plugged in?
I do. That was a bloody palaver.
We've already started, so we might just. I might have to take this bit out. Where we're up to 46 minutes.
Leave it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just carry on.
Can't be a bit of late night drama.
So You've had technical issues, Andrew.
I cannot describe the number of procedures I've gone through to get to this point. I'm honestly certain that there's two. Since Microsoft bought Skype, I'm pretty sure there's like a vortex in between the two Skypes. And I'm now on some web portal version of Skype, which I had to download a minute ago and then restart the machine because I had so many older versions of Skype. I had a 13-year-old Skype version installing, a 6-year version installing. They're all fighting with each other. I've had to reset passwords for like everything. But I'm here now, so that's all that matters.
Excellent. Well, we were just talking about the Man City game, and we were just asking, was there any change from the League Cup final version? Did they go easy on us in the second half? And has the lack of goals from Aubameyang actually shown that Lacazette wasn't the failure that people have thought? So we've all covered that. So if you want to cover that, I'll sit back and have a drink.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, hi guys. I'm making my second appearance of the season, which is more than Granit Xhaka does. Always start with a joke. I think that they did go easier on us in the second half. Actually, yeah. I think if you watch the game back, it was quite clear that the tactics of Man City were get the early goals, just come out and basically allow Arsenal to hit us because they know that we're not effective enough. I mean, when we got that penalty, I just knew. I turned to my friends and I just said there and then, there's absolutely no way we're going to score. And I'm not just saying it in hindsight, it's 100% genuine. You could tell there's such a lack of confidence throughout the team right now that Man City must have known if they went 1 or 2 up, that was game over. I think it was quite clear that was the game plan: get the early goal and then just keep themselves fit for the weekend. I do agree with the point about Aubameyang. I know we're going to come on to some comments from former players later, but there was one very good piece of tactical analysis that I heard last night, and it basically was suggesting that one of the reasons Lacazette has failed, or not failed, but has failed to exceed so far at Arsenal, was actually, if you look at the formation, the 3-5-2, I guess say a 3-5-1-1, it really goes against against the runs that Lacazette's using to make it when he's at Lyon. So when he looks up and he's trying to move into the space, he's trying to get into the hole, he can see that Bellerin or Kolasinac usually are already in the space which he should be aggressing. So it's just limiting his options and the space he can run into, and it's actually more of a system issue than a Lacazette issue. And I think even, when you look at balls down the middle, when we play the balls to play people like a Iwobi or Xhaka, they can't just take a simple touch and play the ball and move the ball fast. Iwobi needs to take 7 or 8 touches and dribbles past 3 people before he even looks up to see what he's going to do next. So we're really not playing to these boys' strengths right now. Even Mesut, he's gone completely off the boil since he signed his new contract, and players like he should be finding. We've been saying ever since we signed Mesut, we've all said, well, he'd have even more assists if he didn't have someone up front who's a bit of a donkey. Well, now he's got a guy in front of them who, between I think Lacazette and Aubameyang, they scored over 100 goals last season. So I don't think it's necessarily a personal issue with those two. I think it's a system issue, and I think we can highlight various areas and various tactics that we've used and various players that we use which just don't play to their strengths. And I think I've been harping on about it for a long time on here, but we don't have any real wide men anymore, people who understand how to play in those wide positions. As I said, with the tactical analysis coming from former players last night, was that we have wing-backs taking up positions that strikers should be in. The wing-backs should be holding firm, or certainly at least 20 yards deeper than they are. And it's just it's kind of depressing to see right now that when you think of Arsene and the early great days of Arsene Wenger, the team just used to purr, and it was almost like there was this telepathic understanding between them all, and they played genuine total football, and it was tactically perfect, it was stylistically perfect. Whereas now we don't have any of that, and we've really regressed as a team, and it's really starting to show.
It might get worse before it gets better, though, Fife, because I think now you're in a situation after the 2 acquisitions of January. You're trying to fit Ozil and Mkhitaryan into the same midfield, which isn't easy because they want to do the same things. And of course, when Lacazette comes back from injury, ideally, you would like to find a way of playing him and Aubameyang together, but I can't see how you're going to do that without some grisly beast of a defensive midfielder. But that's one thing we have to look at. It may get worse yet. That's cheered you up, isn't it?
I think it will get a lot worse. I mean, one of the biggest problems is if you dig in behind what's coming out of the dressing rooms from various sources, fact is modern players expect to be coached within the centre mid. They expect to be told what to do. And when they aren't told what to do, the idea that Arsenal's, you can work it out for yourself because Henry, Bergkamp and Vieira did. Yeah, well, the problem is that was a long time ago. And that was a team of very gifted, special people. Not only were they extremely intelligent and had that telepathic understanding as a team, but they are also exceptionally gifted players. And in the modern game, young players put in a team who have come from clubs where they've been coached within a millimetre of their pubic hair, and they suddenly get chucked in at Arsenal where they're in an unfamiliar system where the team's set up to not defend. Whereas Andrew correctly says you've got wing-backs who are so far forward, they're actually encroaching on midfielders and forwards territory. You've got a midfield which doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing or where it's supposed to be. Everything's open and exposed in the back. And that just starts you off with worries and people being, moved around by the opposition, whether they like it or not. We heard the other week about Rami was talking about how if your midfield doesn't know what it's doing and your defence it makes mistakes, the goalkeeper tries to take it on himself to sort of correct that, and he makes mistakes because of it. That's actually sort of mirroring itself throughout the team at the moment. And I think Dave's right. It is going to get a lot worse. And the only way it's going to improve is when Mr. Wenger leaves and all the crap coaches that he's got with him that don't do any coaching go with him. And someone else comes in and they completely and utterly change the way the team's set up. And see, this is another issue. Wenger to me doesn't respect his opponents. He doesn't pick a team to beat opponents, and he picks teams to give people games minutes rather than picking the team which suits Arsenal to get 3 points in that particular game. And I think that's something you're going to see a big change of when he's gone. But as I said, at the moment, I'm afraid it's please sir, can I have another?
On Andrew's point about Ozil signing the new contract, two quick things on this. Signed his contract around the 31st of January. Since then, he's missed 3 games. He's played 4 games, scored none, assist none. His average Opta rating is 6.6. Now, my mum's usually here on a Tuesday when I'm listening to Arsecast, and she says, "Oh, he sounds like a lovely bloke, Dublin bloke." I said, "Yeah," and she's listening. And she went, "So they're talking about Ozil and the amount of money she's on." And she said, "How much is he on £350 a week?" I said, "No, he's on £350,000 a week." She said, "Well, if he's on that much money and he's not doing the job, then he's there for the money. He's not there because he likes the club." And she says, "I know nothing about football." And I said, well, then I told her, well, up until the end of January, he was on 140 grand a week. And she said, "Did he score more goals and get more assists back then?" I said, "Relatively." And the other quick point, have you ever known an Arsenal game to go ahead and there was no substitutes used? Do you think Wenger was making a point with that?
I think he genuinely had lost all interest and didn't even consider doing it, because it's so unlike him not to make at least 1 or 2 changes around 65 to 70 minutes. And when you're 3 down and you've missed the penalty, I think he felt that, full stadium all barking at him. I think he just turned off for the last 15, 20 minutes.
It's probably a lose-lose situation as well. I mean, I don't know what he's gained by making a sub, as in there was not anything. Danny Welbeck started it. There was nothing that any player on the bench we could have brought on could have done to have changed that game,
But the other point is, Fife, that he could also have changed players that he needed to be fitter at Brighton. And he didn't haul off any of the better players, except that we were beaten 3-0, and get some kids on for a bit of experience against a decent side.
To be honest, I don't buy that. I mean, we used to play in the Champions League on Tuesday or Wednesday and then play Saturday or Sunday in the same week. And we used to play 80 to 90% of the same team. There's no reason why they can't play games. I mean, for me...
No.
Go on, Dave, sorry.
I was just going to say, yes, I agree with you in that respect, but this would have kind of been more of a look, you're a valued player to me. I want you fitter for Sunday. I'm going to take you off now, kind of situation. I believe that was something that would have given a message and given a lift to the 3 players he chose, regardless of who they were. And it would have given a lift if he'd got 3 kids on there to go and test themselves against City. That's all I was meaning.
Yeah, no, I can see your point. I mean, with regards to Ozil, I think the Ozil situation for me is quite clear. Wenger favours him, he gives him time off, but I think Ozil is one of the leading lights behind the scenes who wants him out. When we come to this later, there's a very big thing which no one's picked up on. I've picked up on it, and the reason I've picked up on it is because where I sit and where I work, and I work with quite a few Germans, and I understand their culture and how they are. But if anybody out there believes it's Aaron Ramsey who's orchestrating stuff here, believe you me, it's fucking not. It's the German players and the German-speaking players that are doing it.
I'd just like to say, in my one and only appearance before this appearance on this season, earlier this season, I think we had a discussion, and I mentioned then that there was rumours going around of a new German takeover in the club. I've been messaged that morning to tell me that Ozil was taken over, and also the Wacom. I don't know if you remember, Danny, I put in the chat that night. I think who else? It was Carl and a couple of others, and heard that Joachim Low. We've been blowing kissy faces to him, and he was actually quite prepared to come. So, and also with regards to Mesut being part of that, Steve, as well, or Mesut certainly making his feelings well known there. And then I think a couple of months later, AFC Camden or Pablo's come out and basically said the same thing. So it is interesting that that's kind of that rumor or is, it's now tying a knot with strings coming from different directions.
Well, let's put it this way: it's not just tied up with German manager; it's tied up with Adidas.
Yep.
There's a rumor that Adidas are going to probably outbid Puma by 30 or 40 million quid. They want to get Arsenal, top London club. They've got one of their biggest stars, Mesut Ozil, there. If they could get the German manager from the German team there, surrounded by Mustafi, Per Mertesacker, Sven Mislintat, with a German keeper, they'd have a German team in London. And the whole issue of this is that, and you've got to also add into their Kolasinac and Xhaka, because they're both German speakers and they're both used to playing in the Bundesliga. And my sources within the club told me that Granit Xhaka's fucking furious, apparently, about the fact that he hasn't received any coaching since he's been at Arsenal, and he thinks he's been made a scapegoat. Yes, he's played dreadfully, but he's a modern player requires to be coached. He's not the player who plays for Switzerland, and he's not the player who played for Borussia Mönchengladbach. And apparently his agent was one of the ones that leaked the story. There were 2 versions of that story. There was one where Koscielny wasn't named, which David Hittner of The Guardian got, which I'm led to believe came from Ramsey's agent. And the second version of it, where actually the players' names were named in there, went to Neil Ashton. I believe that came from Granit Xhaka's agent.
Okay, well, yeah, I think that's all a lot of stuff that is going on there, and hopefully it's going to get sorted out soon.
Can I just say, meditation with an old enemy is advised. So I just ate a fortune cracker from Chinese New Year, and that was what came. So maybe Wenger needs to have a cup of green tea with Fergie, and that will sort us out.
Yeah, no, it was the last of the emperors, Fergie, and I think Wenger is the absolute last in world football that you will see that will be that longer serving. We've got a question coming up about how many managers we're going to get through in the next few years. So move on to the Brighton game. Let's go to Steve. Steve, what was your thoughts on that game? I slept through it, luckily.
I thought the game was on Saturday, so I got up Saturday morning. I thought, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, we're going to play at Brighton, we're going to fucking lose. Maybe I'll go to do a bit of shopping. I'll make myself an English breakfast, cheer myself up. So I came back with all this stuff. And then I was looking at Twitter and somebody said, oh, tomorrow. So I thought, oh, the game's tomorrow. So I saved this breakfast and I was cooking it up. And as they were reading out the team sheet, so I was looking down and I was just thinking, nah, this doesn't look good. And I remembered that Glenn Murray, when he was at Crystal Palace, came on as a substitute and bashed us up once before. And, half-hearted, making mistakes. Yeah, we had some chances, but we didn't take them. And again, stupid errors. I mean, you've got one person to mark, and yet he manages to get in between Koscielny and Mustafi and score a goal. It's and you look at people online who are training kids. First rule for a defender: get ball side of your fucking man, block your man. Whether it's zonal defence, whatever. But the gaps between the centre halves on occasions, 20, 30 yards. Why? And I remember talking to John during the game, and there's a lot of people doing what John and I call token running. Iwobi does it a lot. He makes needless runs to pad his stats, so that when Stats DNA Wenger looks up Stats DNA, he can justify picking his shit favourite again.
To see Man City doing that against Chelsea.
Yeah.
My God, I've never seen such blatant stat padding.
But I mean, that's what we were doing to no effect. I mean, and there were players also as well doing it because they couldn't be asked. Iwobi had an appalling game. Every time he got the ball, we gave it away. He'd run down a blind alley, turn round, lose the ball. He's got a similar problem to dart players who play professional darts. He can't let go of the ball. He can't just have a touch and pass or just pass. He's got to take six and spin around and run it, and he keeps losing the ball. And what he does is he runs forward with the ball, so Hector Bellerin follows up behind him, and everybody else goes up with him, and he loses the ball and wallop. Well, where the ball goes is not back where Hector Bellerin should be. It goes right down the inside where Hector Bellerin can't get it, straight in on the centre halves, and their forwards are straight in on the defence. Peter Cech tried to take the blame for those two goals. I thought he should have come for the cross on the second one. He hesitated and therefore he couldn't. But I just thought our hearts weren't in it. I think the players had resigned themselves that they were going to get beaten there and they didn't try. And I think, as much as I don't like to admit, I think there probably is an element within the team that are doing what Chelsea did to Mourinho. And I think you'll probably see, especially after Wenger's spoilt brat outburst in the Times this morning, I think you might see some more of that tomorrow night or Thursday night against Milan.
Okay, yeah, probably. Oh, shut up. Bloody thing's beeping at me again. David, a note I made about that game. Per Mertesacker was on the bench for the League Cup final, and the last time he was actually on the bench was over a month ago, and he's only been on the been on the bench 10 games all season, I think. So I'd say from that he was either on the bench just in case we won, so he got a trophy being his last season, or if he's fit, why not play him against Glenn Murray, who's 34, can't run, no pace, but is good in the air, just like Per. Do you think that maybe playing Per Mertesacker at the back against Brighton would have made any difference? Because that is I heard on a podcast today, that is the first time Brighton have scored from a set piece this season.
Yeah. First time from a corner, yes. Yeah. It's an interesting point. It's one of those you can have a view on and you'll never know the answer. But given that, was his last game the cup final, Per? I don't think he's actually played this season, has he?
I shall go and have a look.
Or did he play one of the Europa games? Yeah, but anyway.
Sorry to butt in. He played in the FA Cup, the infamous FA Cup game at Nottingham Forest, yeah, and that's when we had the offside gate, and we played the wall higher than we played a line higher than the wall, and so they let a guy just basically score a free header, and Per should have really done better. But sorry.
So therein perhaps does lie the answer. I was going to actually argue the opposite view, given that his one appearance last season was the FA Cup final and he had an absolute storming game. So I don't think he does match fitness anymore. I think he just does a job if you stick him out there. But yeah, you reminded me now about that first game. And that was certainly an example of where someone, and him as the club captain, should have been a bit more vociferous and getting that defence organised. So, no, I don't think it would have made any difference. Now that I've had the second viewpoint. Thank you, Fivey.
I was just looking at his game. He's played 3 90 minutes in the Europa League. He played a run of 3 90 minutes in the Premier League, and then he's had 2 other sub games in the Premier League. He played a sub game in the Charity Shield, and he played 90 minutes against Forest and 90 minutes against Doncaster in the first round that we played in the League Cup, and that's it. Fife, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a difficult one. I think that if you look at we clearly don't know the best way, or we don't know what our best defensive formation is. I think if you look at the cup final, we've started with 3 centre backs and then gone for the 2 wide men. Clearly, I mean, I think, being maybe perhaps a bit critical, the only reason we played with 3 centre backs against Man City in the cup final, and then reverted to 4 on the Thursday night, was because we were missing Mkhitaryan for the final because he was cup tied. Actually, and we just basically have no other attacking midfield options. Hence, we had to play with 3 centre midfielders. The way in which we did, and then we moved to the four at Brighton away. And unfortunately, whilst I do love Per, he clearly just isn't physically able to play in a 4-man defence anymore. I think if there's only 2 centre backs, it leaves the second centre back exposed too much. He used to have sufficient vision to get around the pitch and be in the right place to put in those tackles. And famously, I think at Dortmund, up in Bremen, he never received a single yellow card, if I'm not mistaken, or he never received a red card, and it's because his positioning was so excellent, and it used to help him. I've seen games where he's dominated players like Suarez at the game, and as Dave says, that cup final when he was the centre of the 3. But now I don't think we can risk playing him in a 4, especially when you've got Chambers to the right, and don't get me started on Chambers. I've kind of said it since day one. I just don't rate him at all, but. I don't think we could have played him in the final against, and I don't think we could have played him against Brighton. And one thing that's quite damning about the defence, and one thing that was noted last night, is if you just look at how disorganised we are in terms of, again, it comes back to that kind of style, tactics, coaching. When Chambers in the final was getting the ball, Bellerin was so far up the pitch, it left Chambers exposed. He couldn't hit Bellerin because 7 times out of 10, there was already someone down that left-hand side from City's perspective who was pressing and stopping Chambers from being able to find the wing-back, which put him under so much pressure he kept having to try and hit the centre-back. And that's why we're going through this rigmarole with the centre-backs. 3 centre-backs are playing it between each other for God knows how many minutes between the game, just wasting time. It was so obvious. And we just don't seem to have any synchronicity between the midfield and the defence, and we're not building up attacks like we used to. I don't think Per's necessarily the answer anymore. He was great, but I think before we start focusing on getting new defenders in, which we absolutely need to, I think our first priority is to get defensive coaching back into this team. That for me is the biggest issue, because these guys, they're not the kind of Wallies which they're making themselves out to be. They're great defenders, but at the minute they're just not clicking whatsoever.
Steve, talking about the defending that Fife was just mentioning, playing Chambers at right back. Now, he's a centre back, and I know last season for Middlesbrough, when they changed from 3 at the back, of which he was part of, they changed to 4-4-2 or 4 at the back. He did play right back and he did okay. But when this young bloke, I'd never heard of him, Izquierdo, no idea how to say that.
Izquierdo.
Yeah, he seemed to be like lightning down that. I can't remember the last time I saw a player that was that quick playing on the wings. He made Zaha look like a slow coach. So had Wenger no idea, hold on, that bloke there, we won't play Chambers against him because he's going to turn Chambers inside out. And that's what he did. At one point, he did a 1-2 and went round Chambers and then went flying off. And then he did that so many times, whether it's a 1-2, whether it's just sprinting on his own. And then, so a quick thing for you that I've looked up. Ashley Maitland-Niles was stunning when he played at left back or left midfield for us. In his 8 straight game Premiership run, we only lost 1. He benched and lost all 4 of the next 5 once we keep him on the bench. Will we see if he is being saved for the Europa League because he's played every single one of them games so far? So if a player who is right-footed was stunning at left back and left midfield, considering how young he is, what do you think Wenger's logic is, not only dropping him and then seeing the whole team decline, but then when there's an ideal opportunity to play him as Bellerin's backup, he played Chambers instead? Have you got any idea why that might have happened?
Well, there is no logic, and to go back to what Andrew was saying, first of all, if you want to solve the conundrum of Arsenal's lack of connectivity to cohesion, it's a strategic, it's a systematic thing, but it's also a philosophy thing. And we are never going to learn to defend at this club as long as Arsene Wenger's the manager. You know, it's very, very clear that Ben Wrigglesworth, the video coach who we stole off of Leicester, has a thankless task. I mean, in the group the other day, Simon Collins was showing us part of a documentary his company's making about Allegri and Juventus, and they were showing a manager with Allegri and his coaches and his scouts, and they had 5 laptops and a huge screen TV there. And they were going frame by frame, showing where, this bloke went here. Well, Cuadrado shouldn't have fallen on his arse there. He should have stood up. He should have gone to here. And it was complete. You can see how they're completely talking about building a shape off the ball and a shape on the ball, which players should stand where to hold these players in position so that these ones can charge through the middle and do this, that, and the other. And it's a complete alien prospect to what Arsenal do. Arsenal don't respect their opponents. It's very clear that, Izquierdo was well known for being a pacey player. Josh, who lives in Brighton, who's on the radio show, the night before, when the team came out, he said, we can look forward to Chambers being raped by Izquierdo here all afternoon, before the game had even kicked off. It's very clear that if there is any information, he's not taking any notice of because he believes his system to be better. But it's worse because you've got players making the same mistakes again and again and again. And clearly either they're not showing them on video, no one's sitting them down and saying, right, Koscielny, why did you drop off there and play every fucker onside? Why did you go up the pitch there for a corner when you know you've got no recovery pace or your Achilles tendon is like, made of £2 fishing line? Why were you standing there? Why were you so far from Mustafi? Clearly they're not being told because he's got no interest in it. And what was very, very clear, and Andrew will confirm this, was what Dixon said last night, that Wenger's not the type of coach that stops you and tells you what you've done wrong. His many positive, good qualities as a coach are something else. But the problem is that in the modern game, people require to be stopped and told, no, Xhaka 10 centimetres to the left, no, because you can't stand there. You're playing everyone on fucking onside. And, some of Wenger's team selections are more about giving people minutes, keeping his favourites happy. And quite clearly, he hadn't looked at about that player at all in my book. And I think, I don't know why Ainsley Maitland-Niles was on the bench. I know he had a stinker. He was subbed in the final. Whether it was because of that or whether it was because his mum got on the front page of the Sun for living in a fucking cardboard box. I don't know. But, the fact is at the end of the day, we can talk as much as we want about players who are at fault, players who aren't correcting mistakes, defensive system problems, midfields that don't work. There's not time. It all comes back to the same issue, Wenger. And, is it any really surprise we can't defend? There's been no defensive training at the club for 21 years. 3 weeks ago, Mustafi and Koscielny went to Steve Bold and they said to him that the whole of the defence and the keepers and the midfield will stay behind and they will do extra training 2 or 3 days a week because they want to drill and they want to hone down their defensive abilities. And I asked Bold if he'd take it, and Boldy said, yeah, all right, but I've got to ask Wenger. And Bold went and asked Wenger and Boro Primorac, and they vetoed it. Because someone might get injured. But basically what it was about was he didn't like it because he wasn't in control of it. And we know that happened because Steve Bold told Ian Wright about it. And Ian Wright told Arseblog about it. We also know it happened because Steve Bold told Alan Smith and he mentioned it on Sky Sports. So, therein lies the problem. Until Arsene Wenger goes, we aren't going to have a system where we defend in a compact midfield who knows what it's doing. And they aren't going to be able to link up with Aubameyang and Lacazette properly. Simple as that. As Dave said earlier on, it's more of the same and it's going to get nastier.
Has anyone else got anything to say about the Brighton game before we move on?
No, everybody heard what I thought about it on Sunday on the radio show.
Thought that's what I always say. It's my way of getting out of it.
It was shit.
So would we say the season is the Premier League season is over? And do you think Burnley can catch us, David? What do you reckon?
It's looking worryingly possible, if unlikely, because I think we'll may have a little end of season rally. If you look back to the Everton and Palace home games, we've still got enough in us to be flat track bullies. if the mood takes us, and I think they'll do just enough to get the top 6. But it will be interesting to see what sort of teams he picks in the league compared to, well, the 2 that he puts out against Milan, and then we'll see where we go from there, because there has to be some considerable doubt. It's strange that we in 6th are playing Milan, who are 7th in Italy, but Milan have had a run of, is it 5 without defeat, and Gattuso has taken over and has got them at it a bit more. So that's looking a bit ominous.
They've gone 13 games without defeat. He took over on the 27th of November. Then they had the winter break, and then he came back. He drew, lost, won 2, lost 2, and now he's on a run of 13 games without defeat, and of 10 of those have been wins. Wow.
And on top of that, didn't they lose one of the guy who was Fiorentina's captain that died? Wasn't he one of their players?
Wasn't he one of their ex-players?
Yeah, he was one of their ex-players.
Yes.
Their derby game was cancelled, so they've all had a bloody rest. They're gonna want to win that game for him tomorrow night.
And
yes,
they'll make a big thing of it too.
Yeah, they will do. There'll be there's a minute's silence before every Champions League and Europa League games for that poor chap who died, and it'll be so emotional there. Really will.
Rightly. So, what was your thoughts on, is the season over?
It'll be over on Thursday, about just probably as I land in Bristol, probably about midnight, because I can't see us getting anything else but an absolute smashing in Milan.
It's before that, mate. We're a 6 o'clock kickoff.
Oh, are we? Oh, damn! You don't mean
Yeah,
I'm going to have to endure watching that at the bloody airport?
I think you're going to.
Yeah.
Andrew,
I think it's not. I think I respect Dave's opinion, and I agree that the form historically shows that we go through these bad patches about now and then have some kind of mini renaissance towards the end of the season. We always seem to have some renaissance, and it never actually leads to anything apart from maybe 4th. But if you look at the fixture list, Burnley have got they've got Chelsea still to come. Chelsea aren't in a great shape. West Ham, West Brom, Watford, Leicester, Stoke, Brighton, Bournemouth, and interestingly, they've still got to play Arsenal on the 5th of May. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we are going to get 6. Listen, I know Chelsea are in some pretty dire form right now, and we've surely got to have eyes on them once, even when we get our form back. But let's not write Burnley off, because we're not showing any signs of of this form at any point stopping. This form kicking itself back into shape. Burnley are, they're not formidable in attack, but they're solid at the back. And I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. And to that point on Milan, and we're going to, and I'm not going to be there. We're going into a team, I think, as you mentioned, they're 13 games unbeaten. Not only that, they've barely conceded a goal since Gattuso came in. He's still one of, if not the best centre back in the world, in Bonucci. And we're going in there with Danny Welbeck, who scored 20 goals in 4 years at Arsenal. So it's not looking good. Although you never write off Arsenal. In cup games, we do have a team that is suitable for a cup competition. I think if we lose, if we can get a 0-0 draw in the San Siro on Thursday, I'd be extremely happy with that. Take them back to the Emirates and just hope that the time between the 0-0 and the return fixture, we'd grown in confidence somewhat. Although if worse comes to worse,
is that before or after Troy Deeney scores a hat trick at the Emirates in the game between?
Yeah. So that's the thing. Usually our season crumbles on in between 3 games. That when we lost to Blackburn and Bayern Munich, and who was the division? Was it Bradford knocked us out of the? I think we got knocked out of. Yeah, we got knocked out of the FA Cup. Yeah, League Cup to Bradford, FA Cup to Blackburn, and Champions League to Bayern Munich, all within the space of 1 week. That's kind of standard Arsenal, but I think we're going to have 2 weeks of this now. So we're going to have getting smashed by Ostersunds, scraping through, losing in the cup final, losing at home to Man City, losing to, and there is a real risk that we get spanked by Milan on Thursday, get spanked by Watford. Yeah, get spanked by Watford on the weekend and then get spanked at the home leg next Thursday, which would be typical Arsenal. So rather than having just one horrific week, having a horrific fortnight, so it would be all new low. But I think we need to have some faith until it's not over to the fat lady sings, and whilst we still have the Europa in our sights, she's firmly got a gobstopper in, thankfully. But this time in a fortnight, this could be a very very horrible place to be, for the fans and for the manager. Let's just hope for the best, but the form does not give me any confidence whatsoever that we'll be, sitting pretty this time in 2 weeks.
Well, Milan have had 6 straight wins, although one of them was a Coppa Italia Cup. They won it on penalties. 6 straight wins and haven't conceded a single goal. Oh dear, people. Just while we're talking about, you mentioned those runs there, Andrew. Currently, as we know, we've lost 4 in a row. We've lost 6 out of 8. I've just had a look at the last few bad runs we went on, and they're all roughly the same time of year. January to March 2017, we lost 6 out of 9. February, March 2016, we lost 5 out of 7. April to May 2010, we lost 4 out of 5. January, February, again, the February mark 2010, lost 4 out of 6. February, April 2008, we had 2 wins in 13 games. I'd forgotten about that one. And February to April 2007, we lost 6 out of 9. And the last time we lost 4 in a row under Wenger, October 2002, we lost, that was October, we lost to Everton, Auxerre, Blackburn and Borussia Dortmund. So what do you think about that, anyone?
I don't really think it's relevant to what's going on now, because I think it's in the past you might have said, it's down to the pitches being horrible, injuries, players being tired. But this season's special. It's not. You can't compare it. There's players there that are clearly demotivated, pissed off. There's players that are clearly worried about their futures, who haven't signed their new contracts yet. The team is disorganised. It's demoralised. The fans are hypercritical. The media's hypercritical. The board are openly going out talking to the press and saying that they don't like what's going on. And then you've got a manager who threw a tantrum in the Times this morning saying, I won't go. I'm not going. You'll have to sack me. You have to drag me out screaming. I've dragged him out in the car park myself.
So you don't think it's got anything to do with the fact that all those 6 of those were all around the February time, which has always been our Achilles heel?
I think there's a little bit more in it than Steve's opinion. I do agree with Steve that this season is even worse than usual. Although I think it shows pretty much the same characteristics as last season, right? We had a couple of bad losses, and then that accelerated, and that period last year from January on to April, it was the players were. We had this whole it was already in the transfer speculation around Sanchez was already in full flow. We had players being booed off the pitch at Palace away. The whole Wenger, Willie, won't he was there. The protests outside the ground were huge. And ultimately it took a cup final win and a kind of a moment of short-lived euphoria to get that Wenger deal done. I think that was only the second time Wenger met Kroenke all season, apart from when Kroenke was over for the AGM. It was that little short period when he was over for the final game of the season and the cup final. But I do think it mirrors last year. And I also think it mirrors somewhat the year when we lost the league to Leicester. We went on terrible form ever since we got spanked. I think it was in between Christmas and Christmas and New Year, we got spanked 4-0 or 4-1 away at Southampton, even though we were quite clearly the favourites to win the title at that point. And our season just crumbled after then. There's this confidence issue. We seem to be a club just constantly in this existentialist crisis. And if you look throughout you look for the last decade, we always seem to go on these runs of crisis. And it doesn't matter who the players are. The players have changed countless times. But we always go on. And okay, let's take out that 2008 season because there was the horrific injury to Eduardo. And yes, we really blew that lead. But you can kind of see a mitigating factor there. But some of the ones in recent years, it's just the same old shit, but every year. And we're starting to hear the same things now. And listen, I've been very clear on Twitter. Listen, I don't want Wenger embarrassed at the club. I don't want him hounded at the club. I want him to make a respectful decision with dignity about going. But that's the exact same thing we said last year. We said, Arsene, listen, if you win the FA Cup, go out on a high. Don't do this to yourself.
But Andrew, he's not going to do it. He came out this morning in the Sun, in the Times, and he held a meeting of all his people at Arsenal, and he told them, I'm not leaving. I'm going to honour my contract. They'll have to sack me.
Yeah, sorry, Steve, that's exactly my point in terms of it's deja vu, right? It's just the same shit every year.
He's not talking to Gazidis now. This is what I'm told this morning, that he's not talking to Gazidis, that Gazidis ignores him, that he's been pissed off ever since Missing That arrived. He tried to belittle Sven Missing That, and then, of course, realised he dropped a big bollock when Missing That arrived and pulled Mavropanos out of the air for 50 pence. Who is by all accounts, a bloody good player. And then, of course, the Three Musketeers went abroad and went and pulled Aubameyang. And he's pissed off about that because his control's been eroded. And the fact is, basically, what he's done this morning is he stuck two fingers up to the board directors. He stuck two fingers up to Gazidis because he thinks that old man Kroenke is going to still keep him on. The big problem is that old man Kroenke's son, I don't think, is going to want to let his dad do that. But it doesn't matter. All these collapses, the common denominator, as you said, the players have changed. In one season there was huge mitigating circumstances, but in many of these situations, it's why have we collapsed? Well, because someone didn't go and spend the money, someone didn't do the biggest common denominator is Arsene. You can't allow him to put a gun to the club's head and refuse to leave. I think it's pretty clear that he was probably told when he got this new deal, right, we're giving you this so we can sort out players' contracts. But we only expect you to serve a year of it, the other year's notice. And Wenger would have looked at that and just thought, no, I'm gonna win the Europa League, I'm gonna stay for the 2 years, and I'm gonna get another contract. Because he can't envisage life without his job at Arsenal. And I'm afraid to say that the only way he's gonna go out of Arsenal is if he's fired or if he drops down dead, because there's no other way. There's no other way. He hasn't. People say he's dishonourable. I don't believe that. He's an honourable man, but he's just obsessed. He's addicted to that job, and he can't envisage his life. It's cost him his wife. It's cost him his daughter. That's all he's got. Well, I'm sorry, but the shareholders, the fans, the players have all got the right to differ and have something different. And we want something different. And it's got to come because it's very clear where all the problems stem from.
I mean, I agree. I think what's kind of telling now is this time last season. Now, I know there's going to be people saying, I don't listen to polls, but last season there was a lot of polls, mostly on Twitter. And I know you worked in the media, you worked in advertising, Steve, right? If you get polls which have more than 3,000 people answering, that's generally a pretty reliable source, right? And and back then it was roughly about 70 to 75% of fans wanted Wenger to leave. You look now and it's much closer to between 86 to 90%. So there's been a huge step change again. Listen, there's been a huge furor around what Lee Dixon said last night and what other former Arsenal players have said. And whilst you might think it's wrong that former players are coming out saying they want Wenger to leave, surely the most damning thing about the whole situation is that current players are briefing against Arsene Wenger in the press. As we mentioned earlier, perhaps allegedly, I should say, the agents of Ramsey and Xhaka. We don't know, but we do know that there are agents of players on behalf of their players briefing against the coaching skills of Arsene Wenger because they want to have top-level coaching at Arsenal. That, to me, is the most damning thing of all. Ex-players, ex-pros, you can say they have an agenda all you like. You can't say that about the current players. Their only agenda is to win. So it kind of shows that, listen, he's not just lost the fans, but he's lost the dressing room as well. And it's just gone stale now. We all of us have, we've all been very lucky to have seen Arsene Wenger. I know you guys would have seen more of Arsenal before than I was. And so you have that context of, the lowest lows and some of the highest highs. But he's given me some of the, the best football I'll ever see. And I doubt that we'll see some of the football that he gave us in those early days. But it's now got to the point where we just have to say, please, Arsene, go now where there's still some I know it's going to be the worst season he's ever had. But if you look at the step, as I said, that step change from last season to this season, that 10 to 15% increase in the number of fans who want him out. Just think where we'll be if it's exactly the same this time next year. It's not worth thinking about. And if you look at the club finances, which were announced in the last couple of weeks, the club finances actually aren't doing that well. We've not had that Champions League cash now for a while. The squad, 230 million wages, Steve.
But this is another point. But this is another big point. There's a lot of new commercial deals that are in the pot, and a lot of things like sleeve sponsors plus shirt sponsors, etc. Extortionate amounts of money, which mean that Arsenal can afford to pay those wages, but those deals are going to be struck based on getting back in the Champions League. Maybe not straight away. But the big problem is that sponsors. The next step, for my belief, is this: if this goes horribly wrong against Milan and Watford, we had that incident at Stoke railway station. I don't want it to come to where we've got fans on the pitch, because it will. I don't think people understand how some people take it so personally. I don't want it to come to that. As Andrew said, it would be good if he had the dignity to leave while the game was good. I don't think the board would kick him out before the end of the season regardless. They're not going to chuck him out and chuck out Payton and Banfield and all the rest of them and pay them off and then bring in another lot on a short-term basis. They're going to bring in the person they're going to bring in with the coaches they want to bring in when they're ready to do it. That probably will be at the end of the season. But the real thing is Wenger's already cost the club £80 million in lost Champions League revenue. He's also cost the club £30 million on not selling Sanchez soon enough. That's £110 million. Now, if you're Stan Kroenke, losing £110 million, that might be quite a bit important to me. I also think that if you look at a club as an asset and you look at its value, the value's being decreased by the continual employment of Arsene Wenger because they're not getting in the Champions League. They're not going to be signing the players they need to be signing. Then maybe they won't strike that deal with Adidas at the level it could be. Maybe they won't get their commercial revenue up. Maybe this not having the bollocks to get rid of Arsene Wenger to make the next jump up could cost Stan Kroenke £500 million in share value. And I think once Josh Kroenke makes his report to his old man, I just think if the whole thing's gone to rat shit with Milan and Watford, I just don't see how they could possibly justify keeping him there. And if they do, as Andrew said, it's just going to get horrendously ugly.
David, what's your thoughts on the current situation and how it could possibly be resolved one way or the other?
There is only one resolution to it, as I said on Sunday, and it's I'd like to try and be as positive as Jeff about it, and even Jeff now has turned over the weekend. But like Fifey said, the guy gave me the best years of football, the best football I've seen for a long period. Those years you'll never forget. He'll never lose his reputation or anything on that basis. But right at this moment in time, the only solution to our issue is that he goes and somebody else gets the chance to use what is still basically a very good squad, but they need to sort out the issues at the back. They need to sort out the big beast of a defensive midfielder. And he hasn't shown a willingness to address those shortfalls. So it is just him going. This has been this kind of, I don't like this kind of show because it is negative. But I'm looking for the positive side to it, and I'm not getting it. For me, the positive side of football right now is meeting my friends in the pub beforehand and afterwards, and the football in the middle can be pretty damn putrid. It's a shame.
So do you think he needs to go now? Is there any point in him going now, or should we wait to the end of the season?
No, I don't think there's any point in him going now. I don't think you should pour even more humiliation on the guy, and you haven't got anybody in the setup who you would trust to lead us into the Milan matches, for example. So no, I would say, and someone needs to have a word with him, say he's going at the end of the season, say that we're going to announce it before the Burnley game so that the crowd can give him the send-off he deserves and everybody unites behind Arsenal Football Club again. That's my hope anyway.
That was going to be my next question. Do you think if they announce it now, the players will up their game and realise they're doing it to end his legacy with the highlights and doing well?
Sorry.
Go on, Steve.
I don't think they can announce it now, because if they announce it now, they run the risk of them switching off. Do you remember when Ferguson said he was leaving? United just decided, oh, right, we don't have to bother now. And they lost about 6 games on the
I did
trot.
say I'd announce it before the Burnley game, not now.
And you'd have the media, they would talk about nothing else. Who's it going to be? Who's his replacement? Which coaches are getting fired? So they can't do that. Dave's right. They've got to announce it, the morning of the Burnley game. Release a load of material to TV stations and make it his sort of like his last day out in that game, and do it like that.
Can I say, though, the flip side is if things get really bad and we lose both Milan games, the flip side is it might actually be better to announce it earlier, because if we lose both those Milan games and Wenger still comes out with the same press comments about, what does a director of football do? I'm not leaving, I'm staying next season. That's when it's going to get really ugly. That's when the protests, I think, are going to start again. That's when the fans are going to really turn. That's when we're going to see fewer, more empty seats. We're going to hear more boos. I think if things do hit rock bottom and we get knocked out to Milan, my view is announce it after we lose to Milan, and then let the fans for the remain. Because if we say by the middle of the end of March, listen, this is now Arsenal's last few games, and I hear what you guys are saying about Fergie and the dropping off, but the reality is we already would have hit rock bottom, right? We can't get relegated. We can't go any lower. And I think we've already got Europa Cup because of getting to the final against Man City, although forgive me if that's wrong. So let's just announce it now. And I'm telling you, the fans, the WOBs, the AKBs, people will unite and they'll give him the send-off he deserves. And that will be the dignity he deserves. But I think if we go through that whole rigmarole and charade of will he save it, it's just going to piss so many people off. You saw how tense Twitter was and just fans were by the end of last season. I think it's going to be like that on ecstasy if we lose both Milan games and action isn't taken, honestly.
And it will get to that, because the problem is that the board know what they want to do. I think they've said if he doesn't win those games, he's gone. But they've still got to convince Kroenke to do it. And until Kroenke makes a decision, they're hamstrung. They can't do anything. It will get to that. But, I know earlier on, Danny was talking to me about, or me and Dave about, what was it like when other managers got fired. When other managers left, before Arsenal. And I can go back to remembering Terry Neal going. I expect Dave can remember before that a bit. But Terry Neal was a bit like this situation. He got to a couple of cup finals. He won a couple of cup finals. He blew a couple of games. He had a very talented team. They didn't really like him. They didn't really like his tactics much. Stapleton wanted to leave for money. Liam Brady left for money. But it was different then, because you had the Arsenal Action Group, which were some of the leading lights, the older fans my age on Twitter, they were involved in. They were put up to that by David Dean as well. But, they were organising, they were handing out leaflets, they were doing everything outside the stadium, nothing in the games, nothing in the stadium. And they got pelters for it, absolute pelters for it. But, of course, there was no social media. There was no frenzies built up. There were very few foreign fans. There were two camps. There were those that wanted Neil out, and there were those that, supported the club and the manager no matter what. But the big difference, of course, was that the Hill-Wood family ruled Arsenal then. And once was it Dennis or Peter that sacked him, Dave?
Peter.
Yeah,
Dennis.
Yeah.
Dennis. Yeah.
Once Dennis had decided that he'd had enough after that West Ham defeat, he just binned him on Sunday morning. That was it. He was gone. Bruce, I can't remember what happened with Bruce Riot, David.
He had a major falling out with Ian Wright, and one of them had to go, and Bruce Riot couldn't score goals.
That's a great way of putting it.
So he was basically just shown down to the car park, and that was his lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that actually the board had decided that they'd got the decision wrong because we weren't playing the best football. He'd upset Righty big time, and he just wasn't an Arsenal man, Rioch, and that was the thing. If Hillwood thought you weren't an Arsenal man, you didn't last.
He couldn't let go of his days from Bolton, could he? He was telling the Arsenal players how the Bolton players used to train and the drills they did, and I think that really pissed off Righty.
Yeah. He was giving it the old Royal Regimental Sergeant Major stuff as well. Very, very tough on the discipline, fining people. And Ian got a lot of that. I think I remember once I met Ian in the club, and he was in there with Mark Bright. And as soon as I mentioned Rioch's face, Rioch's name, Ian's face went from smiling and laughing to right sour, And he said to me, let's not spoil the night out by talking about that and then use the C word, So,
which is interesting because Ian used to get grilled a lot by Graham, but there was still that respect there, and then it just wasn't the same when Rioch tried it, was it?
No.
I'm just looking at the.
It's quite interesting when Arsenal first came to the club. Ian was still there, obviously, and Ian was, if you like, the life and soul and the joker of the dressing room. And I don't think Arsenal liked it. Obviously, when he first came, a lot of the players were like, "Oh, hold on a minute, what, you're taking their Mars bars away? We can't eat fry-ups before games." There was a bit of that. This foreigner coming over here telling us what to do, until they realised actually what he was saying was good for them. But Ian sort of never really knuckled down to what Arsenal was saying to him. That's how come he ended up at West Ham.
I'm just looking at when Bruce Rioch left. It was. I remember at the time thinking, bloody hell, we're partway through the pre-season. I've just checked now. We've played 7 out of our 8 pre-season games. We only had 1 more to go, which was he got sacked on the 12th of August, according to Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. And then on the 13th of August, we were friendly away at Northampton Town. And then the season began 5 days later. So they put
Stuart Houston?
Yeah, Stuart Houston in charge.
And it Pat Rice.
Yeah, Stuart Houston had 6 games, and then Pat Rice had 4, which I didn't know. Yeah. It's also like I didn't realise that after Don Howe left, that we had Steve Burtonshaw as manager from March to May '86 for 11 games. That was a trivia question I had no idea about.
Frightening.
So I remember the George Graham getting sacked, and I felt the same way about George Graham as I do about Wenger, that I was really sad that he was going. He was the man for me who was the main manager at the club, and I was just driving up the road next to where Cashburton is at the moment, got to the top of that road where you turn left to go down towards the little tube station at the bottom of the back of the clock end, and I was sat there in the car, my little Renault Clio with the radio on, and it announced just before the game that George Graham had been sacked. I think that was the night of the game, wasn't it? The 21st of February. It was here. So I think that was I'm going to go and check now that it was a cup winners. I mean, an international game.
It's just a sad situation, and listen, I agree with what Dave said about 5 minutes ago. It's not nice that we're all on a pod that's negative, because none of us want to be negative, right? We want to come on here and we want to talk about interesting young players and I was chatting to a guy on Twitter the other day in DMs, and I think Dave knows him quite well. Clock End Sniper. He's a nice guy. He's a very positive fan.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And he'll call me up sometimes on DM if I've been a bit negative, and he'll say, come on, lad. And he's just genuinely a nice guy, and he's very positive. But I was saying to him, listen, and he was kind of agreeing. We were just saying, listen, it's got to that point now where it's sad because there's games and you just can't even take a positive from a game. Even if we lose, like we'd lost against Man U earlier in the season at home, we came away and said, listen, put our hands up, we lost the game, but bloody hell, we gave them a game, we should have won that. You look now and it's insipid, it's limp, and actually Arsenal fans have given Klopp, for example, a real hard time. Now, obviously Klopp could have had better results, but I think that when the new manager comes in, and it's not like we expect, we're not these entitled fans that some people like to make out we are. We football fans don't. It's not all about trophies. We want to see progress and we want to see a project, right? You look at Klopp and okay, he's not going to catch up with Man City, but Liverpool are playing the kind of attractive attacking football that we used to on a smaller wage than us. And even you can deride Pochettino all you like, but again, there's a project happening there. Whereas at Arsenal, it's got to that point, and sometimes things just do go stale. Relationships go stale, jobs go stale. Wenger's got to that point where the whole club around him has got stale now, and it's it's not all his fault. I think there's certainly, as I was saying to Sniper, I don't fully blame Wenger. There's a real self-serving attitude from the board and some of those at the top. We've got some blue-blood Etonians who are, in their 80s and they're very belligerent and they're not going to change their way of thinking. We've got Kroenke, who's, completely divorced from the situation. We've got, we've had a vortex of power at that club for so long. It's left us in turmoil in terms of our corporate governance. We have players who, some of them have no passion for the club. We have a Iwobi out clubbing the night before games. We have scouts like Steve Rowley, who apparently is offering nothing to the club anymore. Gilles Grimaldi offering us, seemingly all the wrong players. We have coaches who aren't allowed to coach. We have coaches who can't coach, like Jerry Payton. It's got to that point now where we need someone, and this is going to sound strange, but we need someone to come in and almost be as revolutionary as Arsene was, because we've gone backwards so much in these past couple of years. We need someone who can come in and bring a whole new vision and way of looking at it and kick the whole thing back into shape again and create that project. I'm not saying... Carry on. So I was just going to say, we don't need someone who needs that control, but we need someone who's got that inspiration, should I say.
I'm going to butt in now. I tell you what, I'm mighty glad we're not allowed gas in these flats, because my head would have just gone in the oven.
It's not that bad, is it?
No, I mean,
it's sad.
Can I just make a quote here that out of chaos comes order? And, everything Andrew's just described is bang on and it's negative and it's depressing. But think about it. At the end of this season, it's very, very likely that all the issue causing that will be gone. We will have a new manager with new coaches, with a completely new management structure and a new head scout and a new scouting system, with all the science backup, all the medical backup, with all these players that we've got getting coaching. We'll be buying the players we need. We'll have a team playing with a different system, and we'll have a new future for our club going forward. Probably back with good commercial revenue deals, and we'll be able to go up there and compete for the top four again, and go and get Champions League football. And do some stuff there. We're going to find it very difficult in the first 2 or 3 years to go and challenge for league titles or the Champions League. But we will be an unknown force. There'll be no more cheering by Barcelona or Bayern Munich when they draw Arsenal, because they won't know what they're getting. There'll be no more predictability. There'll be no more Jerry Payton fucking up goalkeepers. There'll be no more Neil Banfield. With no more ruining of players. We've got some exciting young prospects at our club. Eddie Nketiah, Reece Nelson, Ainsley Maitland-Niles. There's a few more tucked away there. There's the Greek kid that I talked about earlier on, Mavropanos. Sven Mislintat's got his eyes on some other players as well. On top of that, we've got Lacazette, we've got Aubameyang. We've actually got quite a good squad. If you added in a DM like, I said this tongue-in-cheek the other day to Jason, but we both laughed and agreed. I said, if you added in Steven Nzonzi in front of the back four of Sevilla, who's a defensive midfield player, but who can stride up the pitch and distribute the ball, but he puts tackles in, cleans up messes. If you put him in there and you actually had Tony Pulis come in the club and drill the defence for 6 weeks, you wouldn't fucking notice. You wouldn't know it was Arsenal Football Club you were playing against, because they've been able to defend. And the fact they'd be able to defend would mean the keeper would stop making mistakes trying to correct their errors. And everybody in front of them would be a lot more confident. So transformation, it may not be to, become Barcelona overnight in a flash of eyes, but transformation to change, as Andrew's saying, someone's coming and create a revolution. There's big revolutions and there's little revolutions which lead to bigger revolutions. The next bloke who comes in, whether it's Julian Nagelsmann or whether it is the current German national team manager, and I believe it will be a German, that person's going to be able to bring about a massive lot of change very quickly by doing three things: changing all the coaches, which will change the philosophy at the club, which will change the way the players are taught, which will increase their confidence. They'll change the system, they'll change the tactics, they'll change the sort of players that we're looking for when we're trying to buy. So even if the bloke might have only been there 6 weeks, if he manages to enact all that, and he will do because he's got to, the change you'll see after pre-season will be massive. So there's nothing to be negative about, Dave. We'll turn the gas oven on about, unless you've got a couple of pasties that you ain't told me about.
And at that point, Steve, didn't someone remind us that Tony Pulis is the manager of Middlesbrough, and neither of us had any idea?
No, but the point is, my point is this: is if you rang him up and said, "Would you like to coach the defence at Arsenal and stop them being arseholes to prove Arsene Wenger wrong?" Pulis would leap at the fucking chance and come and do it. And that's the point. What do all the people that have been blindly supporting Arsene Wenger over these years do when the new coach comes in with basically the same squad, adds 1 or 2 players, and starts competing for stuff again? That's the issue, isn't it? But the positives are that change is on the way, whether it happens in 2 weeks, 6 months, or a year, it's going to happen.
But the important thing is that it's done with respect to what he has achieved and who he is as a man, and we don't want it to end nastily.
No, we don't. But that's also, he plays a part in that as well himself. And if he refuses to go, and the board have to sack him to get what they want for the long-term stability of Arsenal Football Club, I'm afraid that's what they will do.
And that'll be a sad day for me.
Well, it's a sad day for me. I mean, when George got fired, I mean, I used to know. I know him. I used to drink with him, and we walked in the club that night where we used to drink, and he went in there. And about a week later, Frank McClintock was in there, and Terry Venables was in there. And he came up to us at the bar, and he knew us. So we said, "Don't say anything about it." He said but he actually said to me, he said that he felt the board stabbed him in the back. They told him that they weren't going to sack him, that he was just going to get a massive fine and slap over the wrists. But then the FA decided that he had to be made an example of.
Even though there was other managers with all their other dodgy players,
well,
a lot more.
The guy who was the Blackburn manager was an ex-player, Mike somebody, I can't remember his name now.
Newell?
Yeah, he actually came out in George's support. He actually came out and said that, how is it easier? If this is, he said, we all know this goes on. How comes he's the only one that's been caught and he's the only one who's been done for it? And it was well believed by a lot of fans in the know at the time that he got done for it. I mean, he shouldn't have been doing it. Let's make it very clear. He shouldn't have been doing it. He was breaking the rules and the law, absolutely bang out of order. But they were all doing it. All of them.
Let's look at some of the players Liverpool signed at the time that were Scandinavian, not rubbish.
Let's not get into the realms of libel. But let's just put it this way: there was a belief amongst a lot of Arsenal fans in the know that backtracking and that you're going to be made an example was for kicking Liverpool off their fucking perch. 1989.
Well, just look at modern football. Look at how Jorge Mendes and other super agents move their players around within their portfolio every couple of years. Look at Wolves. Look at what's happening there. They're signing players from the top Portuguese teams who are players or servants of Mendes, and they're running it because Mendes wants to have a grip on English football in line with the Chinese consortium, and it's not, and it's also happening at much higher. Allegedly, it's happened with Man U, it's happened with Chelsea. If you look at Mendes' dealings with people like Bebe, I mean, this again, all allegedly, but it's not just something of the 90s, unfortunately.
Look at Bebe now. Wow.
Well, I mean, you can say it's even worse than that, Simon, because actually, if you look at something like the Panama Papers, for example, there are 3 identifiable agencies that we could put in the class of, say, way too close to people with connections to Putin and despots and people in organised crime. All 3 of those specialise in third-party investment. The investors in those schemes, no one knows who the fuck they are, but for sure they're people with massive conflicts of interest, like team managers, their clients who are managers, club officials, FIFA officials, FA officials in countries all over the world, and immigration officials. And they're moving and laundering millions and millions of money through football. One of these agencies owned by someone very close to Erdogan out of Turkey. Another 2 of them have been running schemes for bods close to Putin. So it pales. What was being done in the late 80s pales into significance with what's going on in football today. Because it's not just about moving football players; it's about money laundering, it's about immigration fraud, it's about tax dodging. It's you name it, it's in there.
And if you guys want any advice on that, my phone number will be distributed after.
As long as we get a cut.
Good man.
All interesting stuff. Right, the next thing we're going to move on to is the AST. They had a meeting yesterday, and it got quite. I think that there's been more heat after the event on Twitter than there probably was at the event on the night. And you were there, Mr. Fife.
I was very fortunate to be there, and it was probably one of the most interesting AST events I've been to in a very long time. There's been a lot of furore, as you'd expect. That's kind of par for the course with AST meetings now and former players. And actually, I think that in hindsight, Dixon was probably more negative than positive, albeit he did give very many positives about Arsene Wenger. He admitted that when he joined Arsenal, he wasn't he wasn't the kind of player he felt he was when he left. He talked about how Wenger was a manager who got him physically and mentally prepared like none other had, and pointed to Wenger's stretching routines, his diet, his use of diets. And he also talked to how Wenger brought in a knowledge and a scouting network at that time that really set him apart. But I do think it's fair to say, and if you listen to this pod back and you look at what everyone else is saying, it is a negative time at Arsenal. It's not, everything isn't rosy. Now, Lee Dixon to him is a football pundit who makes a living from giving honest analysis and insight into football. And I think where some people say, Dixon shouldn't be saying these sorts of things, actually, it would go against his professional credibility if he was to give a rose-tinted view of the club just because he once played for them. He gave some very damning analysis. He talked about how he doesn't believe Wenger is Wenger's a coach. He said it's not his skill set. He talked about the qualities of George Graham as a coach, and actually how George Graham scouted him for 6 months to a year at Stoke, and he actually joked about when he was at Stoke in League Two, he used to get the tea room lady to let him know which scouts were there, and he noticed Arsenal were there every month. And when he joined Arsenal, he shat himself because it was such a step up. But George was such a good coach, and the defenders around him made him the defender he was. And he kind of pointed to this with Ashley Cole as well. And this is probably the most heated topic I think that's come out of it. It was actually the point he made was in his opinion, Arsene Wenger didn't create Ashley Cole. Tony Adams created Ashley Cole. Now I know a lot of people have come back to that and said, well, what about the likes of Kolo Touré and Laurent? And Dixon's point was actually these players were so close to a pillar of defence that Arsenal had, was that actually there was a mentality throughout the squad which knew defending, and it had leaders, so people like Vieira learned from them. And he's saying his view is now the club is becoming further and further and further devolved away from what it means to be Arsenal. And so when he was asked around the point of who would you like to be the next manager, he said, and I found it quite interesting, from a romantic point of view, he would love to have someone in there like an Ian Wright or a Tony Adams or actually a Vieira. He said it was an absolute disgrace that Arsenal letting Vieira be moulded by Man City. And the reason he said that was, if you look at the squad now, you've got players like, most recently Flamini, cutting the sleeves off his shirt and not wearing what the captain told him. Players who used to wear the short sleeve shirts with full underarm all the way down their arms. And he talked about kind of the things that made the legacy of Arsenal, the passion for playing Arsenal. And he's talking about how that's now being devolved and how we're moving so far away from that. At one point, you're never going to get that back. So whilst he, I think in his heart of hearts, would like a big name manager to come in, he also wants to see there be more former players there to reinstill that passion of what it means to play for Arsenal, because he doesn't see that in a lot of this squad. And he was very brutally honest. He said that Kolasinac is bang average, which I kind of disagreed with, but it's his point of view. He thinks that 6 out of the starting 11 could be better. He thinks that, he was extremely critical of a couple of players, Bellerin and Mustafi in particular. But he kind of talked about actually how some of these betters could give us a lot more under a new manager. So, I highlighted that piece earlier, and Lacazette, actually, he doesn't blame Lacazette. He says it's a system problem. And Dixon actually gave a 15-20 minute tactical analysis on the way and I shit you not, it was extremely insightful. It was better than anything you've heard on Match of the Day or Sky Sports. And he talked around the 5 key passes a right back needs to make, that he would automatically think and then not just because that was the pass he had to make, but what would be the knock-on effect of that pass to the next pass and where he would then move and what that would lead to. And he just talked about how that just doesn't happen in our game anymore. Instead of that, we've got players moving into the positions that the strikers should be in. Why is a defender in a striker's position? It was quite interesting. He did say, listen, it would be ridiculous to write Arsene Wenger off as not knowing what he's doing. It's got to the point now where the game's evolved so much that the mistakes he's always had in him are being highlighted even more now. Before he got away with it because, he was able to spot great talent ahead of other people. He revolutionized the diets and the exercise within the game. But other people have caught up with that now, and so when he does make a mistake, it's more highlighted. I think I'm trying to give a fair representation of what he said. There was a lot of positive around the club. You could tell he loves Arsenal deeply, and he's just as sad and hurt as we are with some of this. And whilst you don't necessarily have to agree or accept with what he says, I think this idea that he's saying it for some ulterior motive is wrong. He doesn't have training badges, for example, so it's not like he wants to go there and be some head coach at Arsenal, because he literally couldn't become one, even if he wanted to be. I think he's just laying down what he sees as happening at the club right now. And there were some things in there which I thought was extremely interesting. And again, the tactical stuff, the way he kind of ripped open the lack of tactics in this team and this lack of organisation, and how a lot of it boils down to the fact that actually, I think Steve alluded to it earlier, that a lot of the coaches are kind of just proxies. They're not actually coaching because they're not allowed to, or they're not given the initiative. And a couple of years ago, Boldy was given a bit more freedom to do some defensive work, but that's kind of been taken away from him now. Apparently, according to what was said last night. It was quite damning at times. There was praise, but yeah, there was certainly a lot of takeaway points. And it's certainly dominated my timeline today. That's for sure.
It's quite interesting the comments about Cole, because I actually saw a few people that are quite close to people inside the club turn around and say, I think it was Dave Seeger. And he said, well, I don't understand what the complaining is about, this idea that Adams, taught Cole what to do, because Wenger confirmed it himself. He actually was quite proud of the fact at the time what was going on. Adams would have made Cole a great player. I still think Cole went on to become an even better player by joining Chelsea with Mourinho and playing in that legendary Chelsea defence. Hurts to say it, but you've got to give Ashley Cole his due. He went to the World Cup and he had Ronaldo in his back pocket at the peak of his nastiness for 90 minutes, and Ronaldo got fuck all out of him. Yeah. He was a great player for us. He was a great player for England as well. And it's. I think the problem is that there are a lot of people who can't identify with the ex-players as players. Mm. They see them as pundits, because they're 18 or 19 years old. So, what has 89 got to do with them? They don't know about it.
One thing I'd say, and one thing that you mentioned earlier, Steve, I think your comment, to paraphrase you, was that Iwobi does a lot of dead running because he wants to pad out his stats. Now, one thing Lee did say was because there's a real lack of organised coaching at Arsenal, they're now becoming too reliant on stats. And he would say that towards his latter days, sometimes Wenger would say things to him, listen, I'm going to put you on the bench this week. And Lee would say, why? And the response would be, listen, you're on the bench because the stats show you're not running as hard. So we think you're in the red zone. We think you're not as fit. And Lee said, well, that would really piss me off, because actually I know my own body better than anyone else does. I know that I'm not fit. If you're dropping me because you want to give someone else a game, then fine, say that. But he feels that a lot of these players today too easily accept that stats are a reason for them to be dropped. And he's saying that they're all mollycoddled, and that actually that the winning mentality where players want to play no matter what, he feels has gone from the team. Now, you could argue against that if you look at Bellerin's comments today. He's apparently, not his comments, sorry, but the story that he's apparently livid that he's been dropped in the game on the weekend. But it was quite interesting that it was actually kind of, we're now becoming too reliant on artificial intelligence and what we are human experience in coaching, which again, it can be damning, or it can be the fact that you could twist it and say actually Arsenal are ahead of the curve and they're using technology and some of the older players need to accept that. Or you could say, there's kind of two arguments to that point. I get, there is a counter argument. I think there was a lot of really digging into Mustafi, for example, points. There was some highlighting some of what former managers that Dixon knows quite well, and kind of their view on Mustafi, and really highlighting some of the errors he's made this year. It got quite brutal, actually.
Yeah, I saw the comments. I was like following what you were tweeting. I mean, and I admire Gary Neville as a defender, but as a manager, he can fuck right off. He was an absolute fucking disgrace at Valencia, and he lost the dressing room of his players. And I think it's quite difficult to judge whether a defender's any good or not at Arsenal in the current situation, because they haven't got any structure. They don't even drill. They don't even practice. They're left out there trying to figure out what's going on. There's so much disorganisation in front of them. It's almost, it's almost like giving a load of monkeys a painting set and expecting one of them to be Van Gogh. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Dave, have you read any of the comments at all, or have you seen anything to do with it? Or?
I haven't seen anything in depth on it, to be honest. The whole thing that amuses me about it is the fact that Sid from Neasden thinks he has the right to tell Lee Dixon that he hasn't got a right to an opinion. But Sid from Neasden can sit there and say the same old shit day in, day out. I think there are too many precious people out there at the moment, and I understand why people are hurting. But, it's get a sense of perspective on social media. That would be a big bonus.
And that's kind of one, because I've seen there's been a lot of furor. And listen, I'm not trying to highlight any particular people, but I think there have been the people who've been most upset have been the people who are the kind of the last bastions of Wenger, Wenger supporting kind of guys. And what I've said to them is, listen, I don't necessarily agree with everything Dixon said, or I don't have to accept it, but I don't have any problem with a former player giving insight into the club. And I said, and likewise, I have no problem with you disagreeing whatever he said.
Absolutely.
He's just giving his insight. Listen, and I have no reason to believe that anything Lee Dixon said was not true last night. So if he's genuinely telling the truth, or in the way in which he saw it, let's be honest, truth is experience, right? In his experience, he's telling what he believed is the truth. Then who are we to say otherwise? And likewise, if another player came out and said, actually, Martin Keown came out and said, that's bollocks, I remember Tony, and this is who are we to then say Martin Keown's right? It's just all relative. And I think a lot of people have had meltdowns. As you say, it's that kind of time of the season again when everyone's on super edge. We're in terrible form, and these kind of, and a lot of people as well. They try and make themselves relevant on social media by seeing how they can make the most pious or pretentious tweet be retweeted as much as possible to gain followers, I think. And it's a shame that it's a shame that people are so abusive to Lee Dixon. And don't get me wrong, people will be listening and saying, well, people are abusive to Wenger all the time. And none of us on this podcast condone no member
Absolutely.
of this parish, condones abuse to anyone. And I think it's great that people like Lee Dixon and former players take their time out and come and speak to fans. And if he genuinely thinks things are going wrong, then fair play for him for saying that. I think that, equally when Martin Keown refuses to blame Arsene Wenger on Match of the Day, again, fair play to him for sticking to his guns if that's what he genuinely believes. And, we can't, if we all had the same homogenous opinion, it would be a shame. And I think that's one of the reasons, actually, things are so bad at Arsenal right now. It's not because people are battling. I think it's because there's just so much apathy where people have been told for so long, don't like it, don't come. A lot of people just, they're grounded out. They don't care anymore. That's why we've got so many empty seats. And the last thing we want is apathy. I think the fact there is passion in some people is a good thing, because when that goes, you can turn the lights off.
Right. Time for some questions, gentlemen, if you don't mind. We've take 10 minutes to get these done. A couple of predictions, a quick gentleman's nod, and then you can all go to bed. Right, first question for you, Steve, from Was. This is the bloke whose name I said, how the fuck am I going to pronounce that? And so he said Was. Didn't you figure out where his name was from?
No, I asked him. He didn't reply.
Okay.
I think it's Czech.
He says, will we mount a title challenge in the next 5 years if Wenger leaves this summer?
Yes.
There you go, people. Nothing if not concise. You listen to that, Davis? Try it once in a while. Right, next question to David. From Andrew Arsenal. I don't think it's the Andrew Arsenal, your mate. He says, based on their showings for Arsenal, not the teams they are at now, do you agree with the shipping out of Joel Campbell and Lucas Perez? Because someone mentioned earlier in the pod, we have no wingers. Now, Joel Campbell, I think he was a brilliant winger.
Yeah, I think it's clear that Wenger didn't take to either player, and on that basis, they were never going to get a chance. And I think they're just treading water now. I mean, Lucas Perez has virtually said he wants to stay where he is. I haven't heard anything from Joel Campbell for a while. I haven't followed his loan spell away, but I agree with you. I thought he had something about him, and he was doing something that we didn't have in a player there. He was just one of those jinking winners rather than someone who relied on outright pace. He could actually dribble. He could create things, but he also had a bit of a finish on him when he came in the middle. So I think we missed him a little bit. But thank you for the question, Andrew.
He is currently on loan at Real Betis. And I had these pages saved so it would go to the right bit straight away. He's played 3 La Liga games, 1 goal, 1 assist, and he's been out all season with either a knee injury or a sprained ankle. Mm-hmm. What a waste of time. And Deportivo are knackered. Right, next question is for you, Andrew. He says, this is from Sri the Gooner. What do you make of the Aaron Ramsey situation? Is he off in the summer?
Unfortunately, I'm not the oracle that Steve is, and so I can't give a one-word answer. I think it's quite damning that he was dropped for the Brighton game, and when it was clear he doesn't have an injury. So, you look into that what you will, but he certainly, him and Bellerin were the only two first teamers that were dropped for that game. So, yeah, look into that how you will.
Okay, right. One for you, Steve, from Mikko, M-I-K-K. I'm not sure. Well, there you go. I think Alexa just answered your question. She's not sure either. He says, latest thoughts on VAR. After the Spurs Rochdale FA Cup video shambles, we learned that VAR is to be used in the World Cup this summer. I'd personally take the odd wrong decision every now and then rather than have VAR ruin our beloved sport. I mean, personally, I think it's the other way around. I think it's going to ruin our lovely sport. But, Steve, what's your thoughts?
Well, the Bundesliga have got it. It's going to come in La Liga. It's coming in the World Cup. I don't think we're going to have any choice. I think FIFA are going to insist we have it. I have to say that when they first brought VAR in, my first opinion was, the FA are going to fuck this up. A bunch of stupid old men who can't get their heads out the fact that they think that they invented the game, that they're still playing in the 1950s. They've got Stanley Matthews running around inside their head, and they also as well have been using referees to their own advantage to if you like, to make it better for the brands that they favour. Like they used to favour Liverpool, used to favour United. Now it's Tottenham. And, I think there was no attempt made to make VAR work properly. I think referees weren't trained in it properly. I don't think anybody thought about how are we going to involve the crowd in this. No one even made the thought of going and actually looking at how they operate this in rugby, how it's been used in other countries. No one gave any thought to the fact that actually refs need to be mic'd up. If stadiums had big screens and refs were mic'd up and they could turn it on like they do in American football and say, TV and turn it off. And then it has to be quick. How is it Sky can show you an incident for 50 different angles in 10 seconds, yet Neil Swaybreak upstairs can't find his own cocker under the fucking desk and takes 6 minutes to make a wrong decision? It's almost as if you could say that they tried to set out to sabotage it because it didn't suit their agenda. And for me, as an Arsenal fan, anything that fucking disenables Mike Dean from being a cheating fuck is worth having. The game can't stay as it is forever at the top level with the amounts of money that's involved in it, some of the cheating and stuff that's going on. VAR has to be brought in not to correct refs, but to help refs. The game's being played so quick. There's no reason as well why more technology can't be brought into the game as well that works like the goal line technology does. But the people bringing it in have got to think about how they're going to use it, what benefits it's got, how they're going to communicate to the crowd and the TV audiences what's going on. They haven't done that in England, and that's why people see it. Oh, it's bad, and I want it out of our beautiful game. It's not what I'm used to. But the fact is, if it was done properly, it would benefit the game a lot.
Okay. Next question for you, David, from Daddy Mac. He's not my dad. He says he's given 3 questions. One about who do we have as the next manager, which I don't think anyone really knows. One saying is Ozil worth 350 grand a week. Is that what we really need now? And I think we've come to the conclusion it's not really his problem. Not his fault. But the one that I do like is, I like all of them, is why does every keeper decline here yet improve once they leave us? Steady, Steve, steady. Once they leave Arsenal, and why have the club not rectified this? Down, Steve, steady. Take a chill pill.
Jerry Payton.
That's a good job you came to me with that one, wasn't it?
Pure luck. I've got no idea what the fuck I'm doing.
Okay. There's 2 answers. I'll try to be as brief as I can. One is that Jerry Payton got hold of him here, so I've got to say that so that Steve doesn't feel the need to jump in. The second answer is that you have to accept that goalkeeping is a specialist position. By and large, goalkeepers learn by trial and error, and they get better as they get older. So when we let young goalkeepers go from here, it's almost certain that they're going to improve to a certain level. I agree, Fabianski. I thought Fabianski was unlucky to lose out to Szczesny at the time that he did. I thought it criminal that Szczesny was allowed to go last summer when it was clear that Cech was nearing the end of his peak years. But they are going to get better because they're 20-somethings. Not 30-somethings. At 30-something, they're going to be better again. So if that helps, thank you for the question, Daddy Mac.
I can see in my mind's eye now there are currently a load of firemen outside the fire station in Poland looking at some bloke screaming out the window, Jerry fucking Payton! Wondering what the fuck's going on. Right, Schwinn asked a question if we'd already covered about why Ramsey didn't play against Brighton, and any comments on him being the leak for the Guardian story. Who said no, it's the Germans. Again, right, one for you, Andrew. You ready? From Stefan Selby, he says, how many managers will Arsenal have in the 5 years after Arsene Wenger leaves? He says ABW sweepstakes. So how many do you reckon?
I'd go for 2. I'd say, but I'd say that actually I can imagine us having one for a good 3 or 4 years, actually.
I think I'll go with maybe a Carlo Ancelotti father figure to come in, steady the ship for a couple of years, and then maybe go a bit experimental. Steve, what do you think?
It depends on who the first person is. If they get their man that they've obviously set the whole thing up for, then I think they'll only have one manager for 5 years. If he's on a 4-year contract, then obviously he'll have 2.
David, any idea?
2.
Oh, I think we've all come to an agreement there. There you go, lovely listener. Right, question for you, Steve. Try not to carpenter it. So David needs to go and have a lay down. He says, this is from Siddharth Sidhu. No. He says, on a lighter note, do any of the ex-players or legends really possess the managerial qualifications to manage our club? I think he's on about the likes of Henry, Vieira, Arteta.
No, they don't. And let's be very clear. In the past, managers have ex-players who've gone on to manage clubs. Brian Robson, Steve Bruce, Peter Reid. I can't name Glenn Hoddle. I can't name one of them who won anything or made a success of anything. Glenn Hoddle was a fucking disaster at Chelsea and a disaster as an England manager. And, coaching or like looking over Guardiola's shoulder at City for a couple of years, it's not giving you the experience. I mean, if you actually look at Arsenal Football Club, it's the third most successful club in the UK. It's in the top 10 richest clubs in the world. It's an asset worth £2 billion. You don't hand that over on a romantic basis to someone who's wearing a syrup, who's part-time coach at City. You wouldn't give that to someone who's got no coaching badges. You wouldn't give that to Pierre-Emerick, on that basis as a senior manager. You might bring in, say, for example, Joachim Low, who might turn around and say, right, I want some Arsenal heritage, and I want Henry to be able to coach the forwards. I want a Martin Keown or a Lee Dixon, and they're going to have to do their badges. But no, they don't have any experience to manage the team, the egos, the agents, deal with the stats, DNA, the medical, the this, the that, the other. Arsenal's a huge club.
Okay, right. Anyone think I've lined these questions up so they're all relative to each other? One for you, David, and the final one for Andrew after that. This is from Nicky Wilson. David, he says, why does Mr. Arsenal, Tony Adams, never come up when the new managers are discussed? He would definitely sort out the defence, and fans already love him.
Yeah, oh dear. Now, there's a way of answering this. If I answer it truthfully and what I feel, I am going to get absolutely flamed. But I've got to do that, haven't I?
Yeah.
Tony Adams has had spells of management at Wycombe. He's been an assistant to Harry Redknapp down at Portsmouth. When, they got to and won the FA Cup final. But then he has had a period in, was it Albania or Azerbaijan? Yeah.
Azerbaijan,
yeah. His experience is limited. Other than that FA Cup at Portsmouth, it's I don't think that's the quality of experience that we want at Arsenal at this point in time when we're in trouble. I accept your point. The guy could probably work wonders with that defence. But as a manager, he's unproven. So for me, no. But thank you for the question.
But he has done the hard work of going around. He was a youth coach at Feyenoord. He's gone to other countries and watched the coaching sessions, and I think he's concentrating on his charity a bit. I mean, I'm surprised that he doesn't do more managerial or more media. He doesn't seem to be doing either of those two. But he had a heart attack, or was on the verge of a heart attack when he was managing in Azerbaijan. And I think the owner of the club said to him, "You don't look very well. You want to go and get tested out?" And he did, and it turns out he had a heart problem. Mm-hmm. So maybe he doesn't need the stress of being a manager. But he's my favourite ever player. But yeah, he was shocking.
I've met the guy, and I was just awestruck, absolutely awestruck, absolutely fantastic.
There are people who say that he's not articulate enough for punditry. And perhaps he's not good at discussing insight. I'm not sure, but for anyone who thinks he's not an articulate or loquacious man, I'll definitely recommend you go and listen to the Desert Island discs he did. I believe it was 2010, just before he moved over to Azerbaijan, and it was one of the greatest Desert Island discs. As someone who's an advocate of the show, I'm not just being biased. I'm a big fan of DID, and he was very insightful and very charming man.
I got to interview him once, and if you get him on the subject of why England are not producing young footballers now, he will be most eloquent and make absolute sense about why we're in the state we're in. And there's no real prospect of that changing in the foreseeable future. Love the fella.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend for me, and it's probably best that he does stay out of football, because I think he's got so much passion. He'd just annoy the wrong people, but it'd be wonderful to see. But he's not. I mean, you don't go. I mean, him and Merson went down and managed in the lower leagues, which I think is always a good sign of someone willing to learn their trade. Anyway, finally, Andrew, last question from Double D Rivoli. He says, is Henry and Adams hold on, I must have cut this out wrong, opportunistic when they say they are ready? Oh, it probably means, are Henry and Adams opportunistic when they say they are ready for management?
I mean, I think both of them would love to be manager of Arsenal. Whether or not they're ready is a different question. I don't think it's a case of the vultures circling above the kind of the dying carcass. I think, you know, they're asked on a regular basis. If you look at Tony Adams, he's Mr. Arsenal. Why wouldn't he want to be the manager? I don't, as Dave says, we have question marks about whether he has the ability, but I don't think he's there, you know, waiting for Wenger to leave so that he can take the reign, because I don't think Arsenal would give him the job, for one, and because I don't think, I mean, whether he thinks he can take it is another piece, but I don't see this kind of narrative that's being pushed. Listen, that they're both two of the greatest ever players that have ever played for Arsenal, and they're both guys that work in punditry or they have a voice in the media. So it's obvious they're going to get asked this question, and it's obvious that, you know. But I don't see them as being, you know, as trying to be Machiavellians, for example. Not just yet. No.
Can I just say something about Thierry Henry? Whoever the new manager is, if he wanted somebody from Arsenal purely for personal benefit, getting Thierry Henry onto the coaching staff right now, allowing him to maintain his links with his job with Belgium, gives us someone who's going to be in Kevin De Bruyne's ear all the time, who's going to be in Eden Hazard's ear all the time, and it might be worth a 3 or 4 year contract on that basis.
Could be a great assistant manager.
Are you suggesting that he could tap them up for us? Or just know what they know?
No, that never goes on in top flight football.
No, how dare you? Oh, I washed my mouth out. Right. On to predictions. AC Milan, or Milan, if you're Chris and John. This Thursday, 6 p.m. kickoff in Italy. I'm going 2-0 Barini. Steve?
I'm going to go 4-0 to Milan, I'm afraid. Suso, the first scorer.
Gattuso?
Suso.
I thought you said Gattuso. How are you spelling this Suso? Because I've got no idea.
S-U-S-O.
He's their best player, isn't he?
Okay, David?
Oh, I love big games in Italy. I'm going back to 1980 as my inspiration. We're going to win 1-0 with a goal from Eddie Nketiah in the last minute.
Would that have been the Cup
Paul Vasson at Juve?
Finals?
Yeah.
So
this is going to be Eddie Nketiah's year.
Hopefully. Mr. Fife, what's your prediction?
I'm going to go for a optimistic 0-0. And if there are any fans listening who are going, please feel free to give me a shout. I'll be arriving this time tomorrow night. I know a few guys going out there, but there's always be great to have a few more drinking buddies. So yeah, my Twitter handle will be on the show. So please give me a message, and it'd be great to have a pint.
If they don't see it, what is it? PR_Whoru, but that's WHORU. Also, Mike from Gooners in USA podcast will be over there, so we're going to connect out there as well. I'd watch him. He's very hands on.
I can imagine he can sink his pints. So I don't want to have a contest with him. That's for sure.
Have you heard about the industrial action?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
The Italians have decided to strike the transport strikes. So I think I'm going to be walking home pissed with Mark King on Thursday night. So yeah. So if he's displeased, I'll take his phone off him and throw it in the Vile River to save us all.
Right. Next one up is Arsenal v Watford Sunday 1:30 kickoff. I'm going 1-1 Aubameyang. Steve?
I don't want to be a cunt here, but I'm going to have to say it. I think Arsenal will lose 3-1. Troy Deeney.
Oh, I really wanted to say that. David?
Oh, goodness me. I hadn't really...
hurting you, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. But I saw us lose to them last year, so I'm kind of numbed by that experience. But I'm going to be positive because that's what I do. I'm going to go 3-0 and. Oh, God's sakes. Mesut Ozil.
Oh, excellent. Andrew?
I'm going to go for 1-0 to the Arsenal, and it's going to be Aubameyang. Right. Finally, a quick gentleman's nods. My one's going to go to ex-ABW member Andrew, who is at AFC BVB 1410. It's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Andrew. Steve, who would you like to say hello to?
A guy called Jules. You can find him at Julio Guna. He likes a good chat about all things, and he's a very reasonable chap. He's quite funny as well. You can find him at Julio Guna.
Lovely. David? Have you muted yourself?
I'm here. Don't worry. I had a mouthful.
Dog.
Yeah. If anybody was on Twitter at the weekend and following the travelling exploits of Danny Coyle, who started out from Falkirk on Saturday morning to reach the game at Brighton on Sunday afternoon, you'll know what he went through. So I'm going for him. And he is at Grampian Guna, Grampian Guna.
And can we blame Carl for any of his issues with the trains? Because it's usually Carl's fault.
No. It's nothing to do with TFL. But he took all day to get from Falkirk to Newcastle. Late train to York. I don't know how he got from York to London, but and he made it.
If you look at the Islington Gazette, the guy, Laith, who is a football editor, he's actually got a big article on that guy in there about his trip to Brighton. It's actually on their website. It's quite good. I was reading it earlier on.
Oh, we've had Laith on here before.
Yeah. He's a good follow, Laith.
Yes. Andrew, who would you like to say hello to?
Not necessarily hello. It's more of a shout out. So I'm being a traditionalist. So I'm gonna give a shout out to Diego Della Valle, and he's the president of Fiorentina. LWLLL, sorry. And the reason I'm going to give a shout out to Diego is because he made a very honourable decision this week to give a salary for life to David Astori, who unfortunately died on the weekend, as we know and mentioned. And so his salary for life will be collected by his family. And so I think that was a very noble decision made by the club and by the chairman of the club. And it's not often that we praise football for making the right decisions when it comes to money, but I think that was one. And I think that all clubs could learn to lead from that example. Also on the dystopian and myopic deaf focus, Coco, the family Labrador, passed away sadly this weekend, and so it's a shout out to Coco. She will be missed.
Is that your dog?
Oh, Fifey.
It is, yeah.
Oh, that's sad.
Sorry,
Devon, who's been on here before. He's an American bloke. His dog passed away in the last few days as well. Very sad. Yeah. Sad times.
Have you got a shout out there, Mr. D?
Who, me?
Yeah, because
I did mine.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I said happy birthday to Drew.
Who's
formerly of this parish, and I still keep in touch with him and Tom. And I was watching their show at the weekend. It's very good. Right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Steve?
Thank you.
Thank you much, David.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me again. Twice in 3 days.
All cheeky. And Mr. Fife, it's I almost didn't recognise your voice. So thank you very much for joining us, and have safe travel tomorrow. And all the other gooners going to Italy, be careful over there, because they're all a bit mad. I can say that because my granddad was Italian.
Grazie mille.
Yes, indeedy. Right, people, that has been an Arsenal podcast by the wonderful people at Bergkamp Wonderland. You know I haven't written that down. My cat was licking me as I was saying that. I thought she was going to bite me. So Dora, you put me off. Thank you very much, and good night.
Cheeky monkeys.
And here's some more shenanigans after the podcast ended. And good night.
Cheeky monkeys.
I thought, oh no, she's going to bite me because she likes to have a nibble, but I don't always take my hand away because I like a little nibble from Dora. Oh, she's licking me again.
Well, steady.
Don't give me a cheeky nibble, Dora.
You don't want this to get demonetised for bestiality.
She likes to lick your hand and then expects you to wipe the top of her head with your wet hand because she's too lazy to wash herself. Aren't you, Dora? Yes. Now go and make me dinner. Right, gentlemen, if you need to go, you can go. If not...
Good, man. Thank you very much, boys. Enjoyed that.
It was...
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it too.
It's always very good. I think I might see if Chris wants to host next week because he has offered. Jace is busy with the radio shows. He always puts himself up. So does John. We're just lucky. We've got so many great people to step in and get stuff done. So thank you all.
Good, man. See you.
Yes. Right, bye.
See you, Dave. Bye.
Yeah. God hell, 9:30 and we're done. It's usually about now that we're still waffling on about nonsense.
Usually, yeah.
Do you like Mr. Fife?
No, I think he's muted himself because his missus come home, didn't she?
Yeah.
I think the problem is at the current time it's very difficult to be positive, but the only positive you've got to look for is he's going. And, once he's gone, everything's been put in place to make everything go right. And I don't think people have got that. I don't think they understand that's all these people that have been brought in, whether it's Darren Burgess or Shad, the fucking fitness guy, or the new medical people, or Stats DNA, or Jose Sanyehi, or whether it's Missing Lat, or...
There was a bloke from Sky with the contracts. There's been about 7 people, hasn't there?
Has Farmy.
That's it. And all we need now is to get someone in to pick the new cutlery and he can go.
I know, but I mean, they've all been brought in to take the club up to the next level. You've got a whole new scouting regime coming. We're actually getting a scout for Poland as well. Not the German blokes won't be doing it like they were before. Once he's gone and all those people working to a common boss, i.e., oh, fuck me, Bale just hit the poster. Sanyehi, and the new manager's been brought in and he's working, to Gazidis and Sanyehi. I don't think you'll hardly see Quonka. All these new commercial deals come in. Arsenal will have enough money to pay the wages and buy players. If it's Adidas and you get Joachim Löw as the coach, you know what a lot of people have not realised? A lot of the players in that men's World Cup squad that he constructed, they would like to come and play for him in a club, especially if it was in London. You could fucking see someone like Tony Kroos playing in the centre of midfield for Arsenal. People have not worked that out yet.
Yeah, but his managerial record, without looking, I know he's managed in Germany and Austria. Yeah. He didn't do anything too magnificent. And can you translate international manager into a league manager, especially in a country where you're not from? That's the question.
Yes, you can if you're working at a club that's set up like a fucking international side, which Arsenal is, and which is full of foreign players, and most of the players which are from your country. That's what everybody's missing. You've got a German scout. You'll probably get, when he comes, you'll have German coaches. And you've got, how many Germans have we got at the side? Perma, Saka, Ozil, Mustafi, Granit Xhaka's a German speaker. Kolasinac is a German speaker. That's 5 there alone.
And Jens as well.
Jens, that's 6. That's another one, 6. So, you only need... let's say, for example, you went and brought in a couple of really good players from Germany, like another centre half and a DM. That's 8 players that are German. Right, Andrew?
How's it going, Ed? Yeah, sorry, just quickly tidying away a little bit. I was interested in listening to you. I've been listening, though. It's very interesting what you're saying about the Germanification, yeah.